Hilchis Toen V'Nitan Perek Shlishi. Ein moide b'miktzas chayiv shur min atera at sheyede b'pruta. The hidah has to be a pruta, a yeser, or more than a pruta, and v'yichber b'shtei moin kesef v'yeser, and the kvira has to be b'shtei moin kesef v'yeser. Now the lashon Rambam is ein moide b'miktzas chayiv shur min atera, so that this din is a min atera dikadin. Behemshech, next halacha, the Rambam is going to say it's a derabbanan dikadin. It's not so clear. But lepel, that's the din. The din is that in order for a person to be chayiv shuas made of a miktzas, it has to be that the heidah has to be by either a pruta or more than a pruta, and the kfira has to be for a ma, for shtei moin, or more than shtei moin. So basically, the original taina has to be about shtei moin and a pruta, as the Rambam is going to say b'hamshach, and the heidah is going to be about a pruta, and the kfira would be about shtei moin. If it's a bigger tainer, so then you can have more on both sides. But the minimal tainer has to be a pruta and shtei moin, and the heidah will have to be about a pruta, and the kvira will be about shtei moin, and then there'll be a chiyuv of the shvuas made of miktzas. Now, v'kami hi pruta, what's the share of a pruta? Mishkel chatzi se'era shel kesef noki. So the Rambam holds that the share of a pruta is not measured in necheshes. Normally, pruta is a pruta shel necheshes. The measurement of a pruta is measured that there's kesef, which is the amount of silver, which is the weight of a half a se'era, and the value of that kesef, So you have a pruta shel necheshes, which has the value of that kesef, which is a chotzi se'era of kesef. That's what a pruta is. The pruta starts the value of kesef, which is a chotzi se'era shel kesef noki. That's what a pruta is. V'kamehin shtein moin. Shtein moin is mishkal shtayim u'shleishim se'eres kesef mezukik. So Mimela Shtei Moim is 32 se'erim of kesef mezukik, and a pruta is a half a se'er of kesef mezukik. So it comes out that Shtei Moim is 64 prutas. There's 32, the weight of 32 se'eris of kesef noki, as opposed to a pruta, which is the weight of a half a se'er of kesef noki. So b'kitzur, so we have to have, when a person has a shvuas made of miktzas, there was a tfiyah on 2 moin and a pruta lefachis, and lepel he was moida on a pruta, on a chotzi se'era of kesef noki, and lepel he was kaifer on shtei moin, which shtei moin is 32 se'erim of kesef noki, 64 prutas. Halacha beis, kol kesef ha'omer b'teira, whenever the Torah uses the word kesef, for example, chamishim kesef you should pay for Einus Mafata, or Shleishim kesef for a neved. Whenever the Torah uses the word kesef, so kol kesef amr b'teira hu shekel hakedesh refers to the shekel hakedesh, v'hu eser mo, and that's the share of eser mo. So the Rambam said before, a mo, 2 mo was 32 seirim. That says 1 mo is 16 seirim. So when you say that a shekel is eser mo, so each mo is 16, is kesef, the weight of 16 seirim, and memela, so it comes out that the weight of a shekel hakedesh is 320 seirim, 20 times 16. It's called kesef omer b'teira shekel hakedesh b'hu esr mo. Now v'chol kesef shel devreim, whenever the Rabbanan spoke about paying a kesef shekel, that's who mitbarbei Yerushalayim shehoy yasel shlem echad mishmeina bei kesef v'ashar necheshes k'mei shebiyan. So, in other words, in the shekel of Midivreim, which they used in Yerushalayim, was really an eighth. It was the same size of a shekel hakedesh, which was 20 ma. Knows the size of 320 seirim. But on the other end, there wasn't all kesef. It was rather 7/8 were nechoshes, and an eighth of it was kesef. That's the shekel. So the shekel hakedesh was esr ma of kesef, and the shekel of Yerushalayim was also Esser Mo in the sense that it was the weight of Esser Mo, 320 Seirim, but on the other end, there was only an eighth Kesef, and the 7/8 were Necheshes. That's Benegeh, the seller that was in Yerushalayim. Aval HaMo, when we use the word Mo, the coin Mo, even in Yerushalayim, he hois a Kesef Noki Afil Yerushalayim. That wasn't a coin which had partial Kesef and partial Necheshes. It was a coin that was pure Kesef. And that was, again, it was 16 seirim of kesef. V'hi hoisa kesef Yerushalayim. When you said a coin of kesef Yerushalayim, it didn't refer to the shekel, because the shekel was 7/8 copper and 1/8 kesef, it referred to the coin of a mo. So that's the fact. The fact is there's such a thing called shekel hakedesh. Shekel hakedesh is esr mo, and each mo is 16 seirim. And then there's the shekel of Yerushalayim, which is also the size of esr mo. But on the other end, it was 7/8 l'cheshes and 1/8 kesef. And then there was the shear of a mo, which a mo was never mixed with necheshes. A mo was kesef, was pure kesef. Now there's a din that you have to have one pruta and shtei kesef. Shtei kesef. Now what does shtei kesef mean? So be'emes, the shtei kesef, now if the shtei kesef would be a din d'iraisa, we'd learn out that you have to have a shtei kesef, which is a din d'iraisa, so then, vice versa, it would be b'shekel hakedesh, it would be eser mo. Eser mo would be each shekel. Masha'enkin, since the whole musik, that you have to have shnei, you have to have a kvira in shtei moin or shtei kesef, is only a din d'rabbanan. So therefore, the Rabbanan instituted that it should be shtei kesef from the coins of kesef, which is in Yerushalayim. Whereas it's a din d'Rabbanan, but the din d'Rabbanan was that you should use the coins of kesef Yerushalayim, not the coins of shekel Yerushalayim, not the coins of, let's say, a shekel is divided into 4 dinim. There's 4 dinim to the cell of Yerushalayim. It should be divided into 2 kesef. That's his din. The whole musik that the kvir of Eidah b'mikzah should be shtei kesef, who midivreim is a din d'Rabbanan, is also a shtei kesef Yerushalayim. So they instituted that it should be the shtei kesef Yerushalayim, shein shtei moin. V'lei also a shnei shkolim b'shekel hakedesh. They didn't institute it should be b'shekel hakedesh because shekel hakedesh is a diraisa dike kesef, and this is only a d'Rabbanan dike kesef. They didn't institute the shkolim of Yerushalayim. They instituted that it should be shtei mo. That's the Messiah. Zeu hadavar hanirali b'shir kviras hatayna. So according to the Rambam, it's the same thing. The Rambam really said this already, that the hidah has to be in a pruta, and the kvira has to be in shtei mo. Now what's the cheshbon of shtei mo? So if the din of kvira would be a diraisa dikadin of Isis, it would be shtei shekel hakedesh. Masha'inga, since it's the Rabbanan dikadin, so they instituted that it should be the kesef, which is used in Shalayim, which is the share of a mo. That's what the Rambam holds. V'Rabbeisai Heiru shekviras hataynu hu mishkal 19 seiris v'chatzi seirim min hakesef. So according to the Rambam, the cheshbon is 2 moin, that's 32 seiris min hakesef. Masha'ingan, according to the Rabbeisai, the cheshbon of the shtei kesef is 19 and a half seiris. That's how much the kfir has to be. The kfir has to be 19 and a half seiris min hakesef. V'yesh li kamerayis lister esei aderech shetofsu at sheyotzu lehem zeh hacheshbon. And v'yirah, the Rambam says that v'yirah shehu toys, that their cheshbon is a toys, and the real cheshbon is the cheshbon of the Rambam, that 2 moin, that the cheshbon of the kfir has to be 2 moin, which is 32 seiris of kesef. It's nachmal. According to the Rambam, the kfir has to be 32 seiris of kesef, and according to the Rabbeisai, it has to be 19 and a half seiris of kesef. The Rambam doesn't say how they got to their cheshbon. The cheshbon is that by them shtei kesef meant 2 dinim of the shekel of Yerushalayim. So the shekel of Yerushalayim, the cell of Yerushalayim, was the same size as the cell of shekel hakedesh, was the size of 20 moin, which is the size of 320 seirim. But the only thing is that it was 7/8 necheshes and only 1/8 kesef. Now lepel, they're saying that it's 2 kesef. 2 kesef means half of that kesef, of that shekel, because that shekel is 4 dinim. 2 kesef would be 2 dinim, which would be half of that shekel, which would be the cheshbon. That shekel was 320 seiris, so half of it is 160 seiris. Now an eighth of 160 seiris is 20 seiris. So that's the cheshbon of 20. And now, if you hold that the kvira and the 2 kesef has to be, the tvia has to be on 2 kesef, and from that tvia you can have a kvira of 19 and a half and a hidah of a pruta, so that's the cheshbon of 19 and a half. I'll call upon them. So they argue with the Rambam 2 points. Also, first of all, what's the coins we're talking about, and also whether the tvia should be on 2 kesef, and then from that there's a kvira and the hidah, or no, the tvia has to be on more than 2 kesef plus a pruta, and the hidah has to be on a pruta, and the kvira has to be on 2 kesef. But I'll call upon them. The Rambam doesn't accept the pshat of Rabbeisai. The Rambam says that the kvira has to be on 2 kesef, and the hidah has to be on the pruta. Mele, as a result of that, that's next halacha. Halacha gimel, shtei moin upruta yeshli biyadcha. And he says, ein lecha biyadi el pruta is chayiv. Because lepel there was a hidah bepruta, and there was a kfir on shtei moin. However, if he says, ein lecha biyadi el shtei prutas, so the hidah was good. They had a hidah on shtei prutas. Aber potter, why? Mipnei shekafar, b'pachas, m'shtei moin. Lepel, he was kafir on shtei moin, minus a pruta. Now, monoli biyadcha, ein lecha biyadi el chatzi pruta, is also potter, because that's not called a hidah. That's not called a hidah. Shekol hameida b'pachas, mi pruta, ki'ilu leheida b'klum. In order to be considered a hidah, it has to be a hidah b'pruta. Halacha dalet. Meya tmorim yeshli biyadcha. And then he says, ein lecha biyadi el tishim. He tainas I had meya tmorim. And he's saying, I only have tishim rein. Im hayu sham shav sham. So in other words, he's being kaifer on 10 tmorim. He's being made on 90 and he's being kaifer on 10. Now the question is, if the kfir on the 10 is something that's the value of shtei moin, is rein. Im hayu sham shav sham. Ha'eser shekafer bem shtei moin. If the amount that he was kaifer, which was the 10 tmorim, were worth shtei moin, is nishbas, so then there's a shvus made of mixas. V'im lav potter. Now, chamisha v'shisha megezim yesh lebiyadcha. There was some that had the girsa chamisha v'shisha, but the right girsa is chamisha v'shisha megezim yesh lebiyadcha, and he answers him back, ein lecha biyadi ala egez echad. I only have one of the egezim, one nut is rein. Im shava echad pruta nishba v'im lav pata v'chein kol keitz b'zeh. So he has to be a idah a meideh b'pruta. He has to really be meideh b'pruta and be kaifer b'shtei moin. Now, shtei moin is 64 times the pruta. A pruta, we said before, is a chotzi seir of kesef, and the shtei moin is 32 seirs of kesef. So it comes out that the shtei moin is 64 times a pruta. So memela it comes out that if you have 65, if he's money by him 65 egezim, and one egez is worth a pruta, which means one egez is worth a chotzi seir of kesef. So it comes out that the 64 egezim, they're worth 2 moins. That's what the Rambam is saying, that if one of them is worth a pruta, so then we understand that the others which you are being kaifer is worth shtei moin, and memela you have to swear. Halacha hey. B'medvar mamurim, this din, that there has to be a hidah bepruta and a kfir and shtei moin, that's only when we're dealing with kesef. Oy b'minischeru peres kiyetzvam, when we're dealing with something which has value, but it's not kalim. Avala kalim, when we're dealing with kalim, if the tviyah and the kfir is on kalim, so then is ein misharin is dmeim. So the value of it is not relevant. Afilo hoya elsem machten bepruta. For one pruta you could buy 10 needles. And v'to'an ishtei machten. And hoyde ba'achas v'kofer ba'achas is chayiv. Shenamar kesef v'kelim. So we learn out that kol ha'kelim ki kesef, that kelim has a din of kesef. Memela, so sayiv the hidah is on kelim, sayiv the kfir is on kelim. So then we don't rechazach with its value. Now there's a shtickle ha'ara over here in Pshat, because lepeil, the din is that heilich is potter, which means when a person wants someone something, and he's moida, but he says, here it is, so then that thing is not considered a meida b'mixas. That's kilu added a picture and knows, I'm giving it to you. It's not I'm saying I owe it to you the money. I'm giving it to you, and since I'm giving it to you, so therefore now the deal is only on the other part, and the other part you're okay for hakal. That's the pashtus, the havana of why heilich is potter. Now over here, when a person's tane shtei machtem, and he was meida ba'achas and he was kafir b'sheni, is the macha that he was meida is be'en or it's not be'en? If it's be'en, so l'chur it's heilich. We're talking about he owes him 2 machtem. Pashtus was a pikodin of 2 machtem. And Mamela, he's saying one of them he has. He was heida ba'achas and his ben. So if it's ben, l'chur it's heilich. So you're saying a machat. Anyways, there's no chiyuv shua. And on the other elamai, you're going to have to say that it's talking about the machat is not ben. So l'chur, if the machat is not ben, so he's not really being made on a machat. He's being made on the value of a machat. In other words, he's telling him that the value of a machat is I owe you. I'm not giving you a machat. So mele l'chur, and since the value of a machat is pachs m'shav pruta. So the chura, there shouldn't be a din of hidah b'miktzas. So that you're going to have to say that the pshat is that since sof kol sof, the taina was about a machat, and the hidah was about a machat, so even though the pale is paying him for the machat, he's not actually giving him the machat, but since the tviyah was on the machat, and the hidah was on the machat, so even though the hidah was that I took from you a machat, and I owe you money for a machat, and the money for a machat is less than a shava pruta, but nevertheless, that's also considered kalim, and therefore that's considered a Meida B'Mikzas. It's a Meida B'Mikzas, and Mele that's considered a Hidah, and Mele that's Mechayev Shvuah. That's l'chura what comes out. So the Fizah will come out that when a person, let's say, months from someone a Keli, and that person says he owes him the Keli, but Lepel, we're talking about a Pach Mishav Pruta, so then there's also a Chiyuv, because if there's no Chiyuv on it, so you can't say that it's really considered a Hidah B'Mikzas. Tane Kesef Keli. So we're till now we spoke about that he month from him Kesef, so it has to be a Pruta and Shtei Moin, and only then, if he's made a Pruta and Kefer B'Shtei Moin, that's his Chayv. But then now we learn B'Negeh Kelim, that if he was Tane Shnei Kelim, he was Heide Ba'achas, V'Kafar Ba'achas, he's Chayv regardless of what they were worth. Now Tane Kesef V'Keli, one both, and Heide B'Keli, V'Kafar B'Kesef, so then the din is Yesh B'Kfira Shtei Moin, is chayev im lav potter. So in other words, as far as the hidah b'keli makes no difference, the value of the keli. Masha'inkin im yesh b'kfira shtei moin chayev im lav potter. If a kert, if it was heide b'kesef, v'koffer b'keli, so then im heide b'pruta chayev. So the value of the kesef has to be a pruta. Masha'inkin the keli that he's koffer makes no difference. V'chen kol keitz b'zeh. So b'kitzur, b'negeh the keli is not negeh side by the hidah and side by the pruta. Masha'inkin b'negeh kesef, even if it's the hidah itself is on kesef, or the kfir itself is on kesef, so then the hidah has to be a pruta, and the kfir has to be shnei moin. Halacha vav. Now this din of the shear, that it has to be shtei moin, and only you're swearing on shtei moin, that's only talking about by the shvuas made of a mixas. Now heid olav eidachot, afilu lekafir eleba pruta, we're talking about only a pruta, is nevertheless a reason nishba. Shekol mokim sheshnayim mechayv b'nei simomen, so just like if two people would come along and say he owes him a pruta, so the din would be he has to pay a pruta. So if one person says he owes him a pruta, so the din is he has to swear. Ketzad pruta ishava pruta yeshli biyotcha, and the other person tainas the nitva tainas ein lecha biyodi klum, and ve'idachad meid sheyeshlei. So the din is a reason nishma. So the din of a shvua is even a much less, as long as it's a shava pruta. V'chein b'shvuas hashemrim. Afilu hivke that's like pruta ishava pruta, v'toan sha'avda is also nishba. So the shvua of a shemer also there's no amount. There has to be lefachas a pruta, and v'chol pachas mepruta any moment. If it's a pachas mepruta, it's not moment, and therefore ve'im bezn niskokale. So there's no din bezn is not niskokale if it's we're dealing with the. In other words, if you're money from a pikadon pachas mepruta, or alderazeh and eidachot, which is pachas mipruta, so then en bezn nizkokenle. And v'chein kol nishboim v'neitlin, so there's a musik called the nishba v'neitl. So the din of nishba v'neitl is also how much do you have to be nishba to be neitl. So that's nishboim v'neitl miprotum ma'ila. So if you have a din of a nishba v'neitl, if there's a pruta, so then you'll be on nishba v'neitl. So the Rambam is saying that all the din is shvuas, there's no shear other than a pruta. Masha'inkin, the din of shtei moin, that you have to be swearing on shtei moin, that's only by a meideh b'mikzas, and you were kafar on kesef, so you only, when is there a chiyuv shvu on the kesef that you were kafir, only if the kesef that you were kafir was shtei moin. That's this din. Now again, we just learned before, the l'chura lefizeh comes out, that if I'm wanting from you a keli, and even though that keli is less than a pruta, so l'chura there's a din. You have to pay that the less than a pruta for the keli, or else it's not shakas to have a din that it should be a made of a mixes on this keli l'chura. Halacha zayin. Hoyru rabbis. Now this halacha b'amis there's like a stira to the halacha that we just learned. We just learned that the whole din of shnei moin is only a din by a made of a mixes, by shvuas eidachod. And al derazeh b'shvuas haneitlin, al derazeh b'shvuas hashemrim. There's no din of shtei kesef. There's over there, as long as it's a pruta, so there's a shvuah. Now the Rambam says, "Hey Rabbeisai, shahanishboyin v'neitlin einam tzrichim taina shtei kesef," which is l'chur what the Rambam just said before. And then the Rambam says, "Vani eimer shetzorich hanitba sheyichber shtei moin v'achar kach yishova hatikveya b'takonos chacham v'yitol." That in order to be a nishba v'neitel, it has to be that the person that you're taking from is being kaifer on shtei moin, and only then is yishava hateva ativeya b'takonos chacham v'yitol. Only then is there a nishba v'neitel. Masha'inkin, if the kvira wasn't on shtei moin, so there's no din of nishba v'neitel. That's what it says in the Rambam. Shaharei, what's the Rambam's raya? Shaharei kol hanishboim b'tainis sofik. When a person swears b'tainis sofik, is also tzorich shiyeh b'neim kfira shtei moin v'achar kach yishava misofik. When one shutuf says to this other shutuf, there's a suffix by me, maybe you owe me money. So the din is that if the suffix is about shnei moin, in other words, if the shutuf that's tying to the other shutuf says there's a suffix, maybe you owe me a more. In other words, there's a more that I have a suffix, maybe you owe it to me. So then the other shutuf won't have to pay. Only if the shutuf tainas, maybe you owe me shtei moin, or the balabayas tainas to the oris, maybe you owe me shtei moin, only then is there a din of shvuas of the shutfim, the arisim, which are nishboim al tainas suffix. So Pashas, even though it's only a shvua d'Rabbanan, but nevertheless that shvua is only, there's a din that shvua is only if it's shtei moin. So the Rambam is saying, just like by Negea, the shvua which on tainas suffix, it has to be shtei mo. So al derazeh, the shvuas hanetlin also has to be shtei mo. That shvuas hanetlin has to also be more. That's what the Rambam is saying that vani yomer. Masha'ink and the Rabbi Seitai said no, that nishboim v'netlin don't need a tiny shtei kesef. Even less than a tiny shtei kesef, there's also the nishba v'netlin. And the Ravid over here argues with this Rambam. He holds like the Rabbi side, and he says that there's no comparison because over there you're a nishba v'niftar. So you're a nishba v'niftar, so you say you don't have to be a nishba in order to be a niftar. Nor since it's less than shtei kesef, so therefore you don't have to be a nishba in order to be a niftar. Masha'inkin over here where you're a nishba v'netel. So when you're a nishba v'netel, so lepeil, you have to be a nishba in order to be a netel. You have to be a nishba v'netel. And the Ravid has a svara that even for a less than a pruta, afilu hayaschari pachas mi pruta. So also since you want to be a netel, and in order to be a netel you have to be a nishba. So therefore you have to be a nishba v'netel even on less than a shtei moin. So the Rambam is saying this. The Ravid is timing that there's no comparison between a nishboin between a suffix as opposed to a nishba v'netel. And Be'emes there's a big arichos in Shulchan Aruch. In Shulchan Aruch they bring down this din, and the Shach, there's a long arichos whether the Girsa of the Rambam is right. There's a arichos hadvar. Just want to say that l'chura there's a shtickle arim pshat. Whereas when we're saying we're clearing if a nishba v'netel has to swear. So l'chura you have to understand, is the pshat is that there's a svara that the nishba v'netel doesn't have to swear, and therefore he can be noitel without a shvua? Or the pshat is that a nishba v'netel doesn't swear, and memela he's not a noitel. Memela he's not a noitel. He's a nishba v'netel doesn't swear, and therefore he's not a noitel. And that's l'chura what the Ravid is understanding. The Ravid is asking, what do you mean a nishba v'netel doesn't swear? So he's not going to be a noitel. He wants to be a noitel. So memela he should be a nishba. That's l'chura the way the Ravid is understanding. Whereas when you say that this tzad that you don't have a shvua for nishba v'netel. So l'chura by a nishba v'nifter it's pashut that you don't have to be a nishba and memela you don't lose anything. By a nishba v'noitel, so l'chura, if you're not going to be a nishba, are you going to still be a noitel? And l'chura, you could declare what the case is, as we discussed before. There's certain nishba v'noitel where the takana was that you should be a noitel, that through a nishba you should be a noitel. There's some nishba v'noitel that be'emes without the takana you would be a noitel without a nishba. You would be a noitel without a nishba. And the only way and the takana was that you should, and the takana was that you should be a nishba v'noitel. Nachmal, there's certain takana, certain nishba v'neitel, takana was the noitel, and the noitel threw a shvua. And certain takana, certain nishba v'neitel, takana was the nishba, the noitel was be'enu's nishba. Now, b'negei a-socher, l'mashal a-socher, so the chiddush is that he's a noitel. The chiddush is that he's a noitel. And masha'in kein, l'mashal a-pegam shtarei, the chiddush is that he's a nishba. Now, when the Rambam says, kol ha-nishboim v'neitlin mipruto maila, nishboim v'netel miputim v'mayla. So in other words, over there, l'chura you could say, I'm just saying a ha'ara and pshat, the l'chura there would be a makom to say that when the chiddush is the noitel, so then you have to be a nishba v'netel even for a pruta. And that's the din on end of Allah Chavav. Because when the chiddush is the noitel, you can't be a noitel without a nishba. But etzem the whole noitel was a chiddush. He shouldn't be a noitel. The chiddush was that you could be a noitel, but the chiddush you could be a noitel was only when you're a nishba. And that's what the Ravid is timing. You want to be a nishba in order to be a noitel. So then you're nishba v'neitel, even a pachs mipruta. Even a pruta, you're a nishba v'neitel. Masha'inkin in halacha zayin could be, the pshat would be, over there's fakert. If in a case where you should be a noitel without being a nishba, so elamai the chacham imposed on you. A nishba, so now we're saying that the Rambam is saying that if it's less than a shtei moins, so then the Chacham didn't impose on you the nishba, and then you could be a noitel without a nishba, and then there won't be a steer in Rambam. Whereas the Rambam is going to hold like this: that in a case when there is a nishba, when the pastor satakon is that he should be on nishba. Be'emes he should be a noitel, but the Chacham instituted no be a nishba v'neitel, pegam shtori be a nishba v'neitel. So then we say if it's less than shtei moin, you don't have to be a nishba. That's the aniyemer. Masha'enkin in a case where be'emes the pashtus advarim you shouldn't be a noitel, and the Chacham said no, you could be a noitel, but you could be a noitel only with the nishba. So then you could be a noitel even with a only by a pruta. The fiza will come out l'chure that it's not. There's no stira. Halacha ches ein moide b'miktzas chayiv shvur. That the taina that he was toyen, he's being moide from that min. Ketzat. Kur chitim yeshli biyotcha. Now that he answers ein lecha biyodi ela lesach chitim is chayiv. A kur is 30 saw and a lesach is 15 saw. So again, so he's mourning by him a kur and he's being moide on a lesach. So that's a yidah mimin taina. Avalam omerle ein lecha biyodi ela kur shel seirim. He tainet chitim. And he answers Seirim, so then his potter, Shamin Shatane, the taina that he tainet chitim is le'edel le'bei, he wasn't made to anything. And Bahamin Shahedel le'bei le'tana, there was no taina on Seirim. So the taina that he was toyen, he was a kefer hakel. And on the other hand, he was made of something. He was made of something without a taina. There was no taina on Seirim. Dinner zov yeshli biyotcha, pikodin. He tainas, I gave you a dinner zov of pikodin. And he answers, le'ifchadati etzli ala dinner kesef. There's also said shalei min taina, or he tainas more kesef if kadeti etzlecha. I gave you a more of kesef, and he answers back if kadeti etzli ela pruta. Is all of these cases are potter? Sai by the kur chitim, and he answered a kur seidim. Sai when he told him a dinner zov, and he answered a dinner kesef. Sai when he told him a more kesef, and he answered back pruta. Is all potter? Why? Mepnei shetan ein dover. He was telling one thing. And behedele bein acheres, he was made on a different type of thing. Whereas he was tying him one type of thing, and he was made on another type of thing. Even though they're both money. The dinner kesef and dinner zov are both money. But and alderer said the mo and the pruta, but it's a different type of money. This is a dinner zov, and this is a dinner kesef. This is a mo kesef, and this is a pruta. V'cheinem omele asora dinner mitzriyes if kadete atzli. So a certain type of dinner mitzvahs, and he told him leifkadati atzli ella asor suriyas. Also, we're talking about the same dinim, but dinim, different types of dinim. Whereas we're both talking about dinim and dinim of kesef, but this is dinim mitzvahs and this is dinim suriyas. It's all part of the chen kol kiesvus. In other words, me'ena taina means it has to be the same type of item, same type of items, even though they're both money. But there's different types of money. That's also considered shalei mimin taina, and memela hidosh shalei mimin taina is not chayiv v'shvus made of miktzas. Halacha test. Now, meneira g'dele yeshli biyotcha. I gave you a meneira g'dele, and he answers, ein lecha biyodi ela meneira ktana. So agam lechura, they're both meneiras, but this is one type of meneira, it's another type of meneira. So then it's harez a potter, because even though they're similar, in other words, this chitim and seirim are not similar. This is chitim, this is seirim. But on the other end, this is kesef and this is zov is similar, and alderer zeh, this is moim, this is pruta similar, and alderer zeh, these are both types of dinim are similar, and over here also that both meneiras are similar, but nevertheless they're different types of meneiras. Avalim toane meneira bas eser litrim. I gave you a meneira which had the weight of eser litrim. Behedelei b'meneira bas chomish litrim. He says, no, you gave me a meneira, but the meneira didn't weigh that much, it weighed chomish litrim. So then, Hareza made the mixtas. Why? In other words, something that has weight of 5 litrim is really part of something that has the weight of 10 litrim. Because something that has 10 litrim, you could go ahead and shave it off or smooth it down, sand it down, and memela it'll have chomish litrim. So the chomish litrim of this menorah is really part of the eser litrim which he's mourning. And therefore, that's considered a hidom minatayna. A g'dela and a ktana is two different menorahs. You can't make from a ktana a g'delas, or from a g'dela a ktana. It's a different type. You have to smelt it down and then remake it. Mashenkin over here, the thing as it is, it could be chamisha litrim or it could be eser litrim. V'cheinim toane ezer godel. He's tying from him a large belt. Is potter. A belt is not just the length of the belt. In other words, the belt, at the end of the belt, there's a certain finishing. So from a large belt, you can't really make a small belt, because the finishing is not going to be there. So therefore, when he says, I owe you a small belt rather than a large belt, the small belt is not part of the large belt. It's not considered part of the large belt. It says, you owe me a piece of cloth, which is 20 amba long. He says, no, I only owe you a yiriyah 10 amas long. So then it's Arizah Nishba. In other words, if what he's being made is part of what the tviyah was, so that's considered a hidah meinatayna. But if what he was made is not really part of what the tviyah was, in other words, from the part that from the tviyah, from the thing that he was being tviyah, you can't make such a small part. Just like from a meneira gedela, you can't make a meneira ketana. You have to remake it. It's different. A meneira gedela can't become a meneira ketana. And al derech zeh, when we're saying that when you have a large belt just by cutting the belt doesn't become a small belt. A small belt is different than a large belt. You don't make a small belt out of a large belt. Masha'inkin, a large piece of cloth. So from a large piece of cloth, you can take a small piece of cloth. So he's saying, no, I don't owe you the whole large piece of cloth. I only owe you part of what you asked me, which is the small piece of cloth. And v'chein kol ki etzvah, that's together of heidah mimina tainah. He tained one thing, and you're saying part of what you tained, not something similar to what you tained but smaller. There's a meneira ketana, meneira gedabsha, something similar to what you tained but smaller. And al derech zeh, a nezer gadol, something similar to what you tained but smaller. Masha'inkin, it has to be not something similar to what you tained but smaller. It has to be something which is part of what you tained. Because you tained a large piece of cloth, and I'm being made on a small piece of cloth. You tained on a meneira which is 10 litrin, and I'm being made on part of that meneira. Which part of that meneira? The meneira which is 5 litrin, because the meneira that you're taining, you could get a meneira bas 5 litrin out of it. Halacha yud. Kur chitim yeshli biyotcha. And he answers back, Ein lecha biyodi ala kur seirim. So over there, before we learned that he's potter from a shvua. Now the Rambam is saying he's potter af midvei seirim. Not only is he potter from swearing on the chitim, but he doesn't have to pay the seirim either. Why? By saying kur chitim yeshli biyotcha, I'm basically saying that you don't owe me seirim. The person that was made the kurs eirim yeshli biyadi. So it's clearly a person comes to Bez and he says mana yeshli biyadi, mana yeshlecha biyadi, and the person that he's being made to says no, ein li biyadcha, you don't have anything by me. In other words, I have nothing by you rather. So then the din is she'ein bezin mechayven esilit liklum. So it's just like if a person would be made to someone that he owes him money, that mana lecha biyadi, and that person says, no, you have nothing of mine, you don't owe me anything. So the din is that person came out from him because he was made that he's not owed any money. So here also, when he says, kur chitim yeshli biyadcha, so basically he's saying, I don't have any seirim by you. Now the other person says that you have seirim by me. So Einachram, he's being made that he owes him seirim, but on the other hand, the teveya that says kur chitim yeshli biyadcha was kilu made that you don't have seirim. However, since Sof Kol Sof he was made that he owes seirim, so now the person that he was made to, since he was made that he doesn't have anything, so therefore he can't pay teveya ben bedin because Lepel was made that he doesn't owe him anything. But on the other hand, if he was tefus, so since Lepel, this person was made that he owes him seirim, so the tfisa helped. That's what the Rambam paskins. Now there's a order over here in Pshat. So in other words, it comes out when a person says kur chitim yeshli biyadcha, and he answers ein lecha biyadi ela kur seirim, and he's potter even from the seirim. So if he's potter even from the seirim, so obviously he can't be chayav as shvuas made the mixas. Whereas the shvuas made the mixas comes through a heidah. But if this heidah is not an accepted heidah, we don't accept the heidah, so obviously he can't be chayav made the mixas. So what does the Rambam say before that when he says kur chitim yeshli biyadcha, and he answers ein lecha biyadi ela seirim, he's potter from the shvua on the chitim because mashe tove leheidele mashe heidele tove. So in other words, it's not a heidah minatayna. L'chur, it's not a heidah bechlal because since sof kol sof he it's clearly he was made there, that he doesn't have Seirim, so Mela says Eidah doesn't have a din of the Eidah, so why should he be Chayiv Shvua? What do you have to come on to the reason because it wasn't Eidah Minatayna? It's not Eidah B'chal, because there was no Eidah. That's a Ha'ara in Pshat. So someone will learn that the Pshat is that even Lepel, if now the person turns around, the Tivei, and he says, listen, Be'emes Yomi Seirim as well. The truth is Yomi Seirim. But right now is money by Yochitim. No, it's Kur Chitim Yesh L'Biyotcha, and I want to make it clear that I didn't mean to say. No, after he was made the B'Seirim, the Tivei turns around and he says, for sure Yomi also Seirim. But I was right now dealing with the Chitim. And the Seirim you also owe me. So l'chur, now we are accepting the Hidah of the Seirim, because he makes it clear that there was no Hidah that he doesn't owe me Seirim. And nevertheless, Lepel, that's not considered a Meidem Amiktzas, because Lepel, it wasn't a Hidah Minatayna. That's what the Even Ozl says. Halacha Yudalf. Hatoyin is Chaveirei Shnei Minim, V'hoida Be'echad Mem. So then, Ha'idah Minatayna V'nishba, that's called the Hidah Minatayna. In other words, the Hidah doesn't have to be the same min like the Kvira. It has to be part of the Taina. Now, since the Taina was two minim, and Lepel, he was made part of the Taina, so Mele was a Hidah, min Taina. It doesn't have to be that the Hidah and the Kvira are Ba'isi min. That's not the din. Nochamo, Atenes Chaveri Shnei Minim, V'heine Be'echad Mem, is a Hidah min Taina. That's called the Hidah min Taina. Because the Taina was on both minim. And therefore, V'nishba, Kate said, Kur chitim v'kur seirim yesh l'biyadcha, and on that he answers him ein lecha biyadi ela kur chitim. So he's being made on one of the things that he was tevei as chayiv, because lepel, since he tained both and he was made on part of the taina, so that's considered hidam min taina. Now his chalatein v'omar kur chitim yesh l'biyadcha. He started off saying kur chitim yesh l'biyadcha, and v'kelim sheyashlim dvara v'yemer, and also kur seirim yesh l'biyadcha. He wanted to say both, but the Vaili only said Kur Chitim. In other words, before he got a chance to be Tivei Kur Seirim, he already was made on the Kur Seirim. So the din is Im Nira L'Dayonim Shanitan Herim is Chayiv Shua. In other words, if it looks like that, the Nitan realized that he was going about to mon for him Sai Chitim and Seirim, and he wanted a Chaparayim to be made on the Seirim before he mons on the Seirim, and Mele, so it will be a Mahidosh Leib Min Atayna. So then he's chayiv shvuah. V'im lefitume is potter, because sof kol sof he was moida on the seirim when he tied it on the chitim. So there was never a tain on seirim, and since there was never a tain on seirim, so there's passion mimikr the dina lepel. It wasn't a hidom. It wasn't a hidom min ataina, and it wasn't a hidom. It makes us mele is potter. That's mikr the dina. Mashenk and Chazal instituted that in a case where it's nira that he was meirim, that he knew that there's going to be right now two times. And Mamela, he wanted a chaparayim to make a hidah in order to avoid the shvuas made b'miktzas. So then he has to swear a shvuas made b'miktzas. Halacha yud beis. Even the shvuas made b'miktzas normally are deraisa, but over here we have to swear midrabon. Halacha yud beis. Kur chitim yesh li biyotcha. Amr lehen v'kur seirim. And then the Tivei says, and you also owe me a kur seirim. Is amr le'en lecha biyadi seirim. So in other words, first he asked him a kur chitim, and on that he answered hein. And then he says, and you also owe me a kur seirim. And on that he says, I don't owe you a kur seirim. So I raise a potter. That's potter. Why? Because it was two separate tefiyas. And on the first tefiyah he was meida, and that was a hidah. And now on the second tefiyah he was a kefer hakka, so there was no made of mixes. Veins are made of mixes at shiyemali b'basachas. There was one tefiyah, kur chitim, the kur seirim yesh li biyadcha, and v'yemali hanit nein lecha biyadi al kur seirim v'chen kol keiz b'zeh. Mashenkin, it was two separate tefiyas. Even on one tefiyah he was meida, and on the other tefiyah he was kefer. That's not called the shvus made of mixes. That's not called the made of mixes. Molei eser kadim shemen yesh li biyadcha. I have by you filled 10 jugs of oil. And now that he answers him back, Ein lecha biyadi el eser kadim b'lei shemen. So he's potter. Why? Shariton is shemen v'hedli b'charsin. In other words, he didn't ask him for the cheres. He didn't ask him for the jug plus the oil. He says, I have oil that fills up 10 jugs. The oil that fills up 10 jugs, that's what I have by you. And Lepel, the Nitan, was moida about the jugs, not about the oil. So he mon by him oil, and he was made the jugs. So Mele is Mashetan, Elehedoli, Mashedoli, Leitan. Eser Kadim Shemen Yesh Lebiyot. He didn't say what fills up 10 jugs. Before he says, Malay Eser Kadim Shemen Yesh Lebiyot. Over here he's saying, Eser Kadim. I have by you 10 jugs of oil, which means the jugs plus the oil. Eser kadim shemen yesh li biyodcha. And on that he answers back, Ein lecha biyodi ala eser kadim rikonim. You don't have 10 jugs of oil. You only have 10 jugs of 10 jugs. So over here is chayiv shua. Why? Sharitane hakadim v'ashemen and ve'ida bekadim. Like we said before, that if he tines two things, he said chitim and seirim, and he's made on one, so he's chayiv. Over here also, he tined kadim and shemen, and he was made on one, so maybe he's chayiv shua made the mixes. V'chein kol ki eitz b'zeh. Halachi yidal. Mana yeshli etzlecha halvo. That's his title was you owe me a mana because I gave you a loan. And on that the nitva tain is leihoyu dvarim me'elam v'loyavisi memchom me'elam. I never borrowed any money from you. Avol chamisha dina yeshlecha biyadi pikodnei mishum nezek ukesebe. So in other words, he's tining that you owe me 100 because I lent you money. He's saying you never lent me anything, but lepel I owe you a taka 50, but not because you lent me, for a different reason. So over here the question is, l'chura, the taina was money, and he's being made on part of the money. Just that the taina was money because of one reason, and he's being made on money on another reason. So the din is heirer abesai, shezem made them mixes. This is called the regular made them mixes. V'yishava sharitana shuchayiv lemeya lepel he taina that you owe 100, v'heidol shuchayiv lechamishim umali nischayiv lemishum alvoy mishum pikod mishum nezik ulezed daitin neitan. There is the fact that he was tining that you owe me because of one reason, and the other one was tining that you owe me for another reason. So that makes no difference, because lepil sof kol sof, the issue is money. Why he owes the money? If he owes the money because of this reason, because of this reason, b'chlal heidah b'mixes, knows the din that heidah b'mixes. Every heidah baldin k'meidem domi. The heidah baldin is about the money, not about the story why he owes the money. Because the ikar heidah is that he owes him money. How he owes the money, that's not really so relevant. That's not really the nemanis. The nemanis of Eidos Baldin is that he owes him money. So male over here also, he's being made that he owes him 50. He's tining he owes him 100, and he's tining that, and he's being made that he owes him 50. The fact that disagreeing why they owe each other, that is Heirer Rabbi said that that's irrelevant, and the Rambam says Lazeh Daiti Neta. Now the Ravid argues on this din. The Ravid holds that if the lapel, the toyim, the tivei is tiny that you owe me money for one reason, and lapel, the nitva, is answering that I taka owe you money, not all the money that you're tining, but some of the money that you're tining, but for another reason. So since there's a difference in the reason, so that's not called considered a made of mixes. Mashenga the Ram holds no. The ikar is that since they're both agreeing that he owes him money, he says he owes him 100, and he says he owes him 50. That's considered a made of mixes, regardless of why he owes him 50. He was saying he owes him 50 because of a pikodin, and he's tiny. He owes 100 because of the pikodin, but the 50 that he was made of, he tiny that it was misad pikodin, and the 50 that he was made on, he tiny that was misad. He tiny misad alvo, and he tiny some pikodin. That makes no difference. That's a machlekes here, Ram Ravid, whether the fact that he was made on a chiyuv of mammon, which wasn't because of the same reason that the teveya was teveya, is that considered a hidah mimina taina? Now there's another aura over here in Pshat, the Rambam said before that if he tines kur chitim and he is made on kur seirim, so since lepel by him tiny kur chitim, it's ki'ilu he was being made that he doesn't own kur seirim, so therefore he's not chayiv the seirim either. So over here also, l'chura, when he's tining, you owe me money for halva, and he's not mentioning anything about pikadon. So l'chura lies that in this tviyah that you don't owe me anything else, you only owe me this. Now when he comes along and says, I owe you 50 for a pikadon, so l'chura, the Rambam says that he's chayiv as shvos made the b'miktzas. But l'chura, he shouldn't even be chayiv the 50, because just like by the kur chitim, when he says kur chitim, it's kilu, he's saying you don't owe me seirim. So over here also, when he's tining, you owe me money for a halva, it's ki'ilu, he said, you don't owe me money for a pikadon. And when he's made that he owes him money for a pikadon, l'churi should be potter, because lepel, he was made that he doesn't owe money for a pikadon. That's a hara in pshat. So you'll have to say that there's a chilik. When he says kur chitim and kur seirim, so by saying kur chitim, so through that he was being made that it's not a kur seirim. Masha'inkin, when a person says you owe me money for a halva, and he's tining that no, I owe you money for a pikadon, so it could be over there a person could be toya, and it's not really considered a hidah that you don't owe me for a pikadon. That's you'll have to say pshat, that it's not considered a hidah that you don't owe me a pikadon. Lepel, I remember you owe me money. I tined, you owe me money for halva. You're telling me you owe me money for a pikadon, but don't use my words that I said for halva that you don't owe me money for a pikadon. That's for sure. The question is only, is it considered a hidah miminatayna? So the Ravid holds it's not considered a hidah miminatayna because lepel, you owe me money for a different reason, and the Rambam holds it is considered Eidom Minatayna. Halacha Tezvov. Mana v'keli yeshli biyotcha. He tainas mana v'keli yeshli biyotcha. L'peil ein lecha biyodi ela keli. He says, I only owe you a keli, v'halacha, and here is the keli. So the din is ariza potter, v'nishba heses. She'en li etzli elazeh. Why? Because that's called halach. So over here, the Maggid Mishnah says over here, this is that the Rambam holds that bichlal by a pikodin, the fact that I say I owe you a pikodin, but l'peil I'm not giving you the pikodin, and the pikodin finds itself in my house, so that's not considered halach. So therefore, the kasha we asked before, b'negei kelim, that it's considered halach, is not really a kasha, b'negei the machtin, because the Rambam holds that in order for a pikodin to be considered halach is only when I actually give it to you. That's the lashon. So that's mana v'keli yeshli biyotcha. Einli chabiyadi ela keli v'halacha. In other words, the fact that ein chabiyadi ela keli is not enough. It has to be v'halacha. Here's the keli. So then is ariza potter. That's considered a potter from shuas made of mixas, and that's elach. And v'nish b'hesa she'eli esi elazeh. Now Omer balakeli ain't a keli. The balakeli says you're saying that you only have a keli. I'm saying this is not the keli that I'm being moider that I owe you a keli, and here's the keli. Now he's timing. This is not the keli. Lepel, there's no shuas made the mixes anyways, because he tined that this is the keli. But lepel, so now he has to swear, but he has to swear, knows he has to swear a shvua of a kefer hakel on the other part, on the money. Now the other person is tining, the tevei is tining ain't the keli, you never really gave me back even mixes eidah. So the din is kel b'shvuasei shezeh kelev. So then he's kel b'shvuasei shezeh kelev, and memela, so that's also it's a shvua d'rabbanan. In other words, he's timing that this is the keli, and this is I'm giving this back to you, and memela I owe you nothing. And I'm sorry, I'm giving back the keli that I owe you, and lepel, the other thing I don't owe you anything. That's what I'm timing. So memela, as far as I'm concerned, I don't owe you anything. Now the toyin is timing. First of all, the other money you still owe me, and lepel, the keli that you said is my keli, and you're giving it back to me. It's not really my keli. So lepel would say, since lepel he's tiny, it is the keli. So therefore, he's not a meidah b'miktzas. As far as the nitva is concerned, by him it's halach. He said, this is the keli, and here it is, and I owe you the other thing. So lepel, I have to swear, the nitva has to swear shvus kefer hakel on the money that he's being kefer. Elamai, he's timing, the tevei is timing, this is not the keli, so he has to swear another shua, he has to swear that it is the keli. I don't owe you anything, because this is the keli and I gave it back to you, and lepel, the other thing, I don't owe you, so meila, I'm a kefer hakel. So again, Amar bala keli ein zekeli, is keli b'shvuas, is zekelev. However, hoy the hanitan, shein zekelev, now the nitan was moida, that it's taken out the keli, and it's chayev lebi acher. So now is that he's a chayev shua. So basically he's saying that I was moida that I have a keli of yours, and I'm also being moida that the keli that I returned to you wasn't really the keli that I owe you. So maybe it comes out that I'm being a moida, that I'm a moida b'miktzas. Whereas I was a moida b'miktzas, but the only reason why I'm not considered a moida b'miktzas is because I gave you the keli back. But lepel, now that I'm realizing that this is not the keli, so I didn't really give you the keli back. So before, when I tied it, I did give you the keli back. So basically, I'm tidying. I'm not a moida b'miktzas. I'm tidying. I was halach. Mela, I'm not chayav shvus made the mitzvahs. Mashenkin over here, when the other person tidying, this is not my keli, and you're being made. This is not your keli. So basically, what's happened? What's the maskana? Maskana is I owe you the money that I owe you, and lepel I was made on this keli, and lepel I didn't give it to you. So I'm being made on this keli, and I didn't give it to you, and I'm being kaifer on the other keli, so on the other money. So I have a chayav shvus made the mitzvahs. Then the Ram concludes, Kol mokim shenam binyan zeh potter. Whenever it says that you're potter from shvuas meidah b'mitzvahs, as ariza potter b'shvuas hatera. Eino chinami you're potter b'shvuas hatera. Let's say if it's not a Eidom Minatayna, these type of things. Aber le'idav v'chayiv shvuas heses k'misha b'yar v'kam apom. The shvuas heses is nothing with shvuas meidah b'mitzvahs. You're talking about chayiv shvuas hatera because lepel doesn't have a din of a shvuas meidah b'mitzvahs for whatever reason, because it wasn't enough. It wasn't a kfira and Shtei Kesef, but on the other, you still chayiv shvuas heses, because shvuas heses you chayiv also by a kefer hakel.